Hey, this is Jay.
And this is Chelsea.
Welcome to the Shifting Perceptions podcast.
We are bringing you inspiration to live a more creative lifestyle because our favorite people are the ones that choose the path less traveled. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 25 of the Shifting Perceptions podcast. This is Chelsea Alder. This week's interview was with former pro skater, current longboard trickster, downhill skater, and up-and-coming Boston architect, Brian Bishop. Being that Bish is one of our closest friends, this interview was filled with laughter and amazing storytelling about his insane days of skating down back roads at 62 miles per hour, the amazing road of getting sponsored and taking on a bigger position at Original Skateboards, which is where you may know him from, and then deciding to go back to school to become an architect at a time when we all thought he was completely insane to do so. This interview was so much fun, and I feel like we were way more curious than we even realized about how this major shift in Brian's life happened, and we were excited to see which steps happened in between that we didn't know about. I'm still a bit on the side of the line that says skateboarders are a special breed of insanity, but I know Jay loves having this conversation about what type of mental instability it takes to try, fall, bleed, repeat as a skateboarder or any action sports pro. I hope you enjoy this interview. The singing, the beatboxing, the drinking, the laughter, and the insanity of this very personal interview with one of our very favorite people.
Hello, everyone. This is Jay Alders, and while you're listening to this casual and fun and just outlandish interview with our great friend Brian, let me steer you towards his Instagram, Brianbishop_. I just finished another new painting that I'm really excited to share with you. I expect to release that within about a week or two of the time of this podcast. And if you are looking for some art to pimp out your house, or if you're looking for a really cool, unique gift, look no further. You can go to jalders.com. I have art, I have apparel, I've got posters, and I have a free newsletter that goes out once a week with some creative tips, updates, and whatnot. So go to jalders.com or follow me on social media. If you look up Jay Alders, you will find me. You will find our show, Shifting Perceptions, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you or someone you know is about to have a baby, you can find Chelsea, who is a birth doula, on ommamasdoulas.com, or on social media. You can follow her at Instagram at Chelsea Alders or at ommamasdoulas.com. Wanted to share with you one of the great reviews we saw on iTunes. Thank you to Emily in Hawaii, who says, I so enjoyed spending time with Jason and Chelsea this morning. This was my first time listening to a podcast, and to hear a familiar voice in Sean Davey was an added bonus. Felt like I was chilling in the living room of a good friend, talking story and laughing. Humans that you enjoy being around are truly a blessing. Mahalo, Emily. Thanks, Emily. And if you haven't done so already, I invite you to hit subscribe on your podcast player.
Let's jump in. You smoking prior to an interview is going to be a
did
real...
not.
You didn't smoke yet?
No, this is normal.
Really?
This is just Brian being around me.
Wow, this is the intoxication of Brian Bishop.
Let's try to... All of our whole friendship to this day has been for this conversation.
For this moment.
This one moment.
We've been building up this moment for 11 years.
Is that how long it's been?
Yeah, dude, I think, right?
Wow. I mean, that was probably... When was that? 07, maybe 08?
08, I want to say.
The Algonquin, isn't that right? I'm just here as the fact checker. That's what I'm going to do. I believe it was the Algonquin. See you later.
This is going to be definitely the most informal interview we've ever done.
That's good.
We're talking from the future nursery of the Bishop family household in Beverly, Massachusetts.
What up?
Yeah,
with
Bevtown.
some wine and other stuff on the table. I'm just kind of chilling. And yeah, let's do this.
It's very good.
So you were saying you used to be a beatboxer.
Yeah, no, so I
Let's start there.
Let's start this off
We have
really
to start
well.
with the beatbox. Come on, lay it down, Bish.
So I was literally in an a cappella group in high school, and it was called the Kings of the Beach.
Like the Backstreet Boys kind of vibe?
Yeah, except
That you have dances?
They did, but I was like that one dude who was like the beatboxer, and I was trying to be cool when everybody else was doing like clapping and clap.
Oh, I just hit a plant.
Sorry,
That was just
you're
knocked over,
knocking
like-
furniture over.
Sorry,
my
plant.
my oldest plant, you almost just killed. It's fine. It's all good.
Oh yeah, so beatbox. Go ahead.
No. So I was part of this a cappella group in high school, and that's when I learned how to beatbox. I remember like there was this one class, and this guy was like, "All right, so we're gonna teach like 3 or 4 of you to learn how to beatbox." And he was
They
like, "All right,
taught
so
that?
yeah,
That's pretty cool.
but it was like a super informal, just like the sidebar kind of like backstreet situation."
All right.
And he was like, "Yeah, so here's how you do a snare." He's like, and I was like, "Wow, that sounds exactly like a snare drum."
I saw some YouTube videos and it was pretty cool. I was like listening to it while I was driving, and it was like, and you have to practice that move, and then it's like,
Yeah.
and then it's like put that into like. So what do you got?
Well,
What's like your go-to I can beatbox song?
it's really like it's like deep house techno. It's like boots and cats and boots and cats and boots and cats and boots and cats.
I was gonna like
shit.
go.
Oh
with
no,
it.
I was completely kidding. That was a joke. Like,
You were bringing me back to like my 20s, bro.
yeah, I know. It's like.
All right, we're going off on a tangent. I didn't even have any wine yet.
I know.
That's the thing.
What
This
is this
interview
wine
has
anyway?
nothing
Organic,
to do with music
Nothing.
at all.
Pacific
Nothing.
Redwood.
No, it's good.
Anyway, so we're here with Brian Bishop, and Brian we've known for quite a long time, as you could probably tell. And so Brian is a former, current pro skater. What do you classify yourself as?
Well, to be a pro skater, you have to be like that's your profession.
Currently active.
So
on the scene. So you're
I,
a former pro skater.
to be super official about it, I just changed my Instagram bio to being former pro skater.
Formerly known as
pro
Okay.
skater.
All right,
But
so-
that like I'm still sponsored, but I'm not making like a full amount of salary to make it worth.
Okay,
being
but isn't that
professional.
interesting? We were just watching a surf film about that. That's sort of like it's like the free skating thing. You can actually get sponsored fairly easily these days just by
yeah.
having an actual presence in the scene.
Yeah. The thing is, it's a lot of people that are out there trying to just build their repertoire, or like people who are literally just like out making videos with their friends. Like that's
Yeah.
how I got sponsored. But a lot of people are just like already have a following from something else. And then
Yeah.
they're like, "Oh yeah, by the way, I skate too." And someone's like, "Oh yeah, that's awesome. Let's give you some product or give you some opportunity." And then you can go from there.
That's awesome. Well, so let's talk about, I feel like until you, the only pro skaters I knew were shortboard pro skaters. So you have sort of a different career. And
Yeah.
let's talk about how that all started, where you started with that, and go from there.
Yeah, so I think for me, it was started just organically like that. I was just very young. I was skating with my friends and making videos and stuff, and it just kind of.
What about like before you started making videos? Like at what point were you good enough where you're like, I want to make videos?
I'd say awful.
You were terrible.
I
and
was-
you're like, let's
I
just
was-
make videos.
Yeah,
Like,
no. So it started with like filming ourselves with our camera phones.
Okay.
Like just like, dude, you did the best 180 I've ever seen.
Okay.
Like you need to put this on some social media thing, even though social media wasn't around. But like you needed to document it, because that's how we were able to like critique yourself and learn and like study
Okay.
yourself to like figure out what you're doing wrong.
And so when you started, it was shortboard first.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, it was so street skating was always like I still street skate like as much as I do
Yeah.
downhill stuff. But it definitely started that way, and then I moved on to downhill, and it kind of evolved from there.
What was it about skating that kind of drew you to it? Like for me, I picked it up at a really young age also, and like I loved the idea of having an activity where there was no like teams, there was no score, like it was make your own rules, it was push yourself. Was that the same for you? That were you like an athletic guy on team sports as also, or was this like your thing?
Yeah. I pretty much did every sport when I was a kid other than water polo, like
Yeah.
ball sports included. Like I did soccer, baseball, basketball, like I did rugby for a while. But then I found
If I had like a neck the size of yours, I would too.
Me too.
I'm going to go and take that as a compliment, but
It's
we'll
a
see.
Total compliment. Look at my neck. I'm like a pigeon.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. No, so it was like, so definitely independent sports were right up my alley. Gymnastics was huge. I did that for probably 5 or 6 years. And then skating was always something that was like, I could just go out and do it on my own terms and find my creativity that way. And it was, you could do it like as a social thing with people, and you could go out for a session and hang out with your friends and do that. Or if no one was around, you could just go find a parking lot somewhere and just, skate by yourself.
Yeah. Was it more like a sport in your head or more of a creative outlet?
Definitely not a sport. And I still struggle with calling it a sport. Like, I know that's kind of like a sensitive subject in the skate,
I get that.
Because people, it's a very different career for some people, and they choose to do it that way. But I always thought of it as a passion that is just manifested in some creative output. I guess.
Drink.
Yeah. Is that the first one?
That's the first one. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I never thought of it as a sport.
Okay.
Skating for me was always just an outlet for my impulsivity and my energy, and something else that was just, and this really worked for me. I think also my drive for like constantly trying to do something better than what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
It was always a great outlet for me to try to challenge myself and never be satisfied.
So what was the first sponsor that you remember getting?
This is actually a good story.
Okay.
So, excellent question.
Thank you.
There's a company called Fusion Scooters.
Oh
my God.
No joke.
Wow.
So
Are
they
they
hit
still
me up.
around?
I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry,
they
we laughed at you, Fusion Scooter.
Sorry.
Yeah. If you're still listening, sorry. I
Just
didn't.
like using the word scooter as a skater is like it's like a funny situation.
You could have any cool name, and then if you end it with scooters, you're
Scooter.
done. I'm sorry. It's out. Yeah, so Fusion Scooters, they hit me up on YouTube, and they were like, hey, we saw like some of your skating stuff, but we think you might be interested in trying out this carving 4-wheeled scooter.
Of course.
Because I was like,
Who wouldn't be?
Yeah.
yeah, sure. So they sent me one of these things, and it was like this like giant plastic, like awful. Oh, it was just so bad. But it had like the I can't even describe it. It's like these. It was a 4-wheeled scooter that I could like rotate. It was like it had torsional thing like
And it had handles.
And it had handles, and it was like it was just meant for like you couldn't slide on it. You couldn't do anything.
Could scoot.
You could literally just carve down the hill and yeah, you could scoot. That was it. I was like, this is nothing better. It's if not worse than a normal scooter. So like, they sent me one of them for free, and I was like, I think I had to make a video or something like that, or post a picture or something, and then that was it.
So when did it switch from like actual just free stuff to like, okay, I could actually make some money doing this? Because that's always like an interesting switch over.
Yeah. So that was definitely all because of my dear love, my first and only sponsor, still Original Skateboards.
Yeah.
They hit me up probably a year after the Fusion days.
Yeah. And how old were you?
I was 17.
Okay.
I think. Yeah, because it was just before I graduated high school. And so Scott, the owner of Original, hit me up on
What's
YouTube.
up, Scott?
What up, Scott?
Holla.
Miss you, buddy. So he sent me a message saying that they were like starting this company and wanted to. Well, they had to start the company in probably 5 years before that, but they were developing a team and wanted to start building a rider base. And so I was sponsored with them for a while, and then halfway through my college career, I think it was sophomore year, I had a talk with them, and I'd been like skating around with them and going on trips and stuff, and then they brought up the fact that we might want to do something like a contract and work out some kind of salary, and I was like,
Whoa.
didn't even think that this was possible.
Yeah.
And also, like, the first message they sent me was from on YouTube, and they were like, yeah, we're looking. I think the title of it was like longboard sponsor. And I was like, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I didn't know that you could even have a sponsor for longboarding, let alone people would actually want to like give me free stuff. It was just me just doing my thing, and people, apparently wanted to watch it.
So the videos were really like, that was the contract was because we're going to be doing these trips and we're going to be making these killer videos. That's what it came down to.
Yeah, okay. I think so. I mean, it was also like prototyping too. Yeah. So that when they would like create a new idea for a board or something, they would send me like 5 different decks with like a very minimal difference, and wanted to test out which one like felt better.
So let's dive in for a couple minutes into our like super original nerds and skateboard nerds on this, because I do
Sure.
think that's a fascinating thing about like what you guys did there, because they did create magic with those boards.
Totally.
So what in the beginning, like talk about that first board you tried from them, and then a little bit about the evolution. Like what was so important in these slight changes that, and do you remember the names of the boards at the beginning?
Of course I
Okay.
do. Oh,
All right.
the names of the boards are like the most memorable part.
Okay.
For me. So my first board was my first original board was a Torpedo 40.
Okay.
It
I don't
was-
even remember that board. Was that like
No.
did they got rid of that
Yeah,
one?
that was discontinued in like, I don't know, 2009 or something
Okay.
like that. It was around for a little while. But yeah, it was like this super round nose. It had like a little kicktail on the back, and it was just like mainly for carving. Like it had a little kicktail so you could do some kind of tricks on it, but it was mainly just for cruising around and carving
Okay.
and stuff. And then they didn't actually have the Apex 37 when I joined, and that was kind of like the board for me that opened possibilities into doing this full time. And like it was always a good opportunity to work with Original, because they were always trying to think of something new.
Yeah.
And that was just at the core of that company.
Yes.
Was like-
Well, so, and here's the one like thing I always thought about with you with that company is like they have an equal parts like extreme creativity mixed with the skate side, and I think like that spoke to you a lot, because that's literally your balance too. Yeah.
and the like the relentless work ethic.
Yeah.
Because I mean, a lot of people think that they see the videos and they see like tours of the warehouse and stuff, and we're all just like hanging out, skating or whatever. But what they didn't see was like Scott at his computer, like 60 hours a week, working to the bone, going through like the most minutia detail on like one of the graphics or something, and like making sure that everything was perfect. And it came down to it wasn't just like the computer and the like the back of house stuff, but like on trips, it was very cool because they had a rigor with the way that they wanted to create something, and they had the vision from the very beginning.
Yeah.
Versus going out there and like I had gone on trips with other companies and stuff, and it's always like, yeah, we're going to here and we'll skate for a few days and then we'll take a day off or whatever. When we would go on a trip with Original, it was like Battle Star everything at the hang on.
Drink.
Battlestar Galactica, is that what we're going by?
I think so. I've been watching a lot of The Office recently, so
Battlestar Galactica was awesome.
it was. I never actually have seen it.
My God.
I just
the
referenced
newest
it.
one, like from 2000, whatever?
Never.
It was amazing.
Not once.
Continue. I was
Anyway.
going to ask you, actually, before we go on, a lot of people have no idea what longboard skating and that you did really is. Like, everyone at least has seen a shortboard skater on the street.
Yeah, sure.
People play Tony Hawk, like, obsessively. They understand that.
Yeah.
And then they see like chicks in bikinis doing
Yeah,
longboarding. Like it's
right.
hard to understand
totally.
like what that is.
So can you explain to people that don't have a grasp in this world on like what kind of stuff you were doing? Because truthfully, like when I first met Scott and then I met you, at that point I had been shortboard skating, just street skating and skating half pipes. I had no idea there was a longboard scene.
Mhm.
And the stuff you guys were doing, I had no concept of any of that.
Yeah.
So can you kind of describe some of the stuff and how it evolved from like street skating to where you eventually got to?
Sure. Yeah. I think it was always derived from the 1970s skateboard movement, because street skating was always around, and it was always like the standard for skateboarding has always been you see a dude on the skate park doing a kickflip. That's like the base that most people know of, right? And then some people were starting to take these skateboards down hills and stuff, and they would eventually change the size of the wheels they wanted to use, and stuff was being customized based on what they wanted to do. So longboarding is more of it's essentially downhill skateboarding, and it originally was called longboarding because the decks were obviously longer, and then you had a longer wheelbase, which was more stable at high speeds. So the whole thought behind it was that you were able to have much more platform and have more stability, more control when you're going 50, 60 miles an hour. And then it started to kind of revert back in the last probably 10 years that people were going down hills on shorter and shorter boards. So originally it was like it went to this longboarding thing, and the decks got longer and the wheels got bigger. And then this movement was coming back that people were bringing the wheelbase back down again, because you were able to do tricks and you're able to take the same board all over town. You could go to the skate park with it. You could go down a hill with it. You could be comfortable in all different avenues. But longboarding is still one of those things that it's really popular on like college campuses. You see like dude bros going in to get like a burrito at 3 a.m. on a longboard and just cruise around. And then you also see people who are like competing in Brazil at 70 miles an hour, one-on-one. And it's like this, but it's on the same kind of wheelbase, same kind of situation, but completely different usage.
So there's like kind of different worlds of longboarding. I'm going to talk about it as if I have no idea, so people can kind of grasp.
Sure.
So you have like the aspect of longboarding of like transportation, which we all know.
Yeah.
As Chelsea mentioned, the hot chick in bikinis going by, which I've never noticed before.
No, me either. It's weird.
But then you guys were also, you had like a scene where you're doing flip tricks, you're doing shove-its, and you're doing street tricks that were like inspired by street skating, but then also, like you said, like the downhill skateboarding. Now, which of the street tricks and that aspect was kind of like the first to pull you in, or was it the downhill, living in Massachusetts with hills all around you? Which of those sucked you into the longboard?
So it's funny that you say that we're in Massachusetts and there's hills all around me, because the longboard and downhill skate industry is mainly West Coast. And that's because there's a lot of canyons out there, and there's a lot of really long roads in Colorado and other parts of the world that have like really long stretches of road.
Yeah.
But living in Massachusetts and on the East Coast, the winters are brutal. You're kind of stuck inside parking garages. You find like flat terrain that you're able to go out and skate around. So for me, it was definitely more of the freestyle trick side of downhill skating and longboarding and skateboarding. That for me, it just resonated really well because it was so accessible. And then when I started skating down hills, it was more like just really steep straights. That's it. It was like a 30-second ride, and then you're done. And then you eventually found like more mountain roads, and you went down to to North Carolina or California or somewhere else to find longer roads to do longer runs in. But for me, it always came down to blending the two different styles together. That you could do tricks while going faster. So that for me was where free riding came in, because that's a whole other discipline of this. Is that it's not necessarily just getting down the hill from A to B as fast as possible. That's more like downhill racing. Free riding is when you're trying to have fun and you're doing power slides and you do a little bit more creative movements while you're going down the hill. And that way you can have fun and actually have a different experience on the terrain without just going A to B.
So I feel like somewhere in this mix of your career, I remember, the free riding being more popular for you just because you were doing the videos. So that was happening. And then all of a sudden you were doing the big jumps. So that happened. And that is the first competitive side of this that you really took on, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about those jumps.
Sure. Yeah.
You guys can look this video up.
Let's talk about the jumps.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah. So that's interesting. It was kind of crazy the way that it started coming about, was because so free riding is a discipline that was happening all over the country. And then you'd see things pop up around races that would be called slide jams. Okay, and you'd say, and it's just it's just an empty road with a bunch of people going down it, just doing slides. And some people criticize
at like very fast speeds for the most part, or this was pretty slow. Okay.
I mean,
what kind of speeds are we talking about here?
So downhill would like the fastest I've gone is about 62 miles an hour.
Jesus.
But slide jams are generally from like 20 to maybe 40.
Okay.
Depending on the hill. The average speed for slide jams is probably around like 15 to 30 ish.
Okay.
And which is a comfortable speed, because if you're doing 30 miles an hour, you have enough like time and composure to do like probably one slide and make it like that's your whole run. If you do 10 to 15 miles an hour, you could fit in probably like 10 or 15 tricks or whatever.
What if I did like 2 miles per hour? Could I fit in?
Totally.
Then you could wear a bikini and look really cute.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what's so cool is like it's super approachable, because that's where like a lot of people were dependent on the community, was at these slide jams.
Yeah.
Because people who were only capable of doing slides at 2 miles an hour were taking the same course as someone who's a pro doing something else,
right?
A lot more intense. So that way you can get inspired or like just chat with them and hang out, and there was like a community building experience for sure.
That's cool.
But anyway, so that's where the big jump started happening, was at the slide jams. I had made some like kickers in my garage and stuff, and I was like hanging out with my friends, and we were just like, oh, we'll bring the kicker to the session today, and we'll just like.
What's a kicker?
Sorry, a kicker is like a really small jump.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it could be really larger. The term is used for a launch ramp.
Okay.
So anyway, so we were building these little ones. They're probably like 2 feet, maybe 3 feet or whatever. And then it started turning into this like border cross thing that all of the slide jams I was going to compete in, and around the same time races were happening, people were bringing bigger and bigger jumps, and people were starting to do tricks off of them and stuff, and it turned into this like whole other discipline of what's called border cross, like downhill. And it was interesting because it was originally thought of just like this cool thing that you do at the same time as you're doing free riding.
Almost like an entertainment feature going on.
Yeah. And then it turned into this whole sector that was like big air, which is like this whole other competition that I don't think a lot of people saw coming.
Yeah.
And some people are really critical of it. They're like, why would you do that on a longboard? You could easily do it on a street deck or a vert deck or whatever. And but for me, it was always it was really cool because you could go down the hill, do your slides, and you're going really fast, and then all of a sudden you're flying through the air, which is kind of like, it's not really seen in the downhill skate.
Aren't we kind of like mimicking
industry.
Snowboarding here? Like, isn't that kind of the like...
Absolutely.
That's like interesting. It's like we're almost migrating towards something inevitable because we're already doing it on snow. So it's like not that weird to be suddenly doing that.
Yeah. Especially from a spectator point of view. Like, every time we go to a skate event or something like that, and then the neighbors come out of their houses and their eyes just bug out of it. They're like, what are you doing?
I remember seeing those videos and thinking, I don't know when we got there, how you were just doing like more just like that relaxed skating, and then suddenly we're doing these crazy jumps and wearing leathers head to toe. And, I don't know.
Yeah. And so how high are you going on these jumps? What were some of your mega ramps that you did? Give people like an idea of what you were doing.
So it's interesting because a lot of people think about it in height. I think about it more about in distance.
Okay.
So the height thing, I learned that the faster you go, you actually don't necessarily go that much higher if you hit the same ramp. Okay. So like the way it would work is you're at a big air competition, you have a launch ramp and a landing. Hopefully, sometimes you didn't have a landing, and that hurt a lot more.
Oh my God.
But essentially, it would work is that you'd have like distance competitions. So like you'd have a freestyle competition, people would do tricks or whatever, and then it would generate itself. It would drink. So at a big air competition, it starts with a kicker and then a landing, hopefully. And then everybody hits it one after another, and then the ramp gets pushed further and further back. Right. And then the goal is to obviously go as far as possible until no one can go farther than you. But what happens is though, you have to go farther, so you have to go faster, so you end up going higher, obviously. And but the height thing you end up probably being like maybe 12 feet in the air at most. Okay. And then eventually you start just not going farther, you end up just going higher, which is really weird. So in order to go farther, you have to go really far, really fast in order to actually get the same amount of distance. So I remember there's one competition in Cathlamet, Washington, and the farthest distance I did on a flat course, not flat course, as opposed to like Woodward ramps, whatever, on an actual like downhill skate course was 37 feet, I think. Whoa. In distance.
Damn.
Which was cool because it was like
you're like flying for 37 feet. That's amazing.
Yeah. And the crazy part about it was like it was towards the end of the day. They usually put the big air competitions at the end of the day, and so the sun was going down, and it was like almost like the street lights were coming on, and I was like, I just need to land this trick so I can just put this behind me and move on, and eventually I landed it, and it was the biggest jump I've ever done, which was cool.
Oh my God.
Wow. Was there at the point we met you, your career as a skater was already sort of like blown up, right? So like at what point did you feel like you went from like this 17-year-old kid to like a renowned athlete with people around the world recognizing you, knowing who you are? Like there's been multiple times when we were hanging out with people and we would like mention your name, and like the people we were with or their kids or someone would be like, I know that guy. I saw him on YouTube. Like when did it first feel like, holy crap, like this is really happening?
Yeah.
And like I am like a public figure.
It's still insane to think about, honestly. Even when you tell stories like that, it's ridiculous.
Like you've been recognized, obviously, in your life, like many times. Like
no, well, we did that event in the Outer Banks, and it was just so cute. There was like a line of kids outside waiting for you to like sign whatever they had on their bodies. Like, it was just so cute.
It's
I mean,
so
that's
awesome.
And that's just kids like thinking about shooting a YouTube video about the little trick they learned. So it's
Yeah,
got to be
right.
surreal for you to like see that.
Yeah, like when did that
Absolutely.
first happen, and what did it feel like?
So I'd say it probably was around 2010 to 2012 where it just skyrocketed. So it went from like showing up at a competition to, it's just like competing and like doing kind of well. And then like years down the road, I would show up and I literally wouldn't be able to get from my car to the start without people like wanting autographs or like pictures or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, especially Broadway Bomb, like in New York.
Yeah.
I remember I think it was like 2011 or something like that. And I actually went with Heather, my wife, and we had just arrived. We were like getting set up or whatever. And I really had to go to the bathroom, and I literally didn't have like a second to go away to go like take a piss in a bush. You know what I mean? And eventually like Heather had to step in and was just like, guys, just give him like 30 seconds and he'll be right back.
He's
I
trying
promise.
to piss
I was
in
like,
a bush.
he's going to be right
Children
there.
now.
Exactly. So anyway, yeah, but I mean, I would say it's still, I can't believe exactly. Sorry. I keep letting the microphone away from my house. So I don't know.
So, coming through that story, since this is like the premise of our whole podcast, let's talk about. There was a time when we're sitting with you at our house, and I remember talking to you about like, I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to become an architect. This is what I'm going to do. And Jay and I were like, what the fuck are you doing?
We were like, are you fucking crazy?
Like the peak of your career. And it was like, no, like I've got to, and I feel like that's one of your superpowers, that you could see the long term and what that meant. But like, that was a really big decision.
And that was pretty much at the peak of your career, wasn't it? Like, it seemed like it was.
Yeah. I'd say that my decision to go back to school was, it was kind of twofold. One was because I recognized that I was at a peak. I don't know if it was the peak.
Yeah.
But I recognized that I was getting injured a lot more frequently. I was kind of at a point where I had started to take on more of like an administrative role. So I was a team manager. I was getting involved with the company, and I was starting to skate less. And I remember when I first got sponsored, I was talking to Heather, and I was saying that eventually if I get to the point where it gets from 50-50 or less of skating to doing like office work for the skate companies, that's when I would think about moving on. And not that I would stop skating or whatever, but it's always just been that this part of my life was not temporary, but I just wanted to soak in as much as I possibly could and capitalize while I could, and then think about long term at the same time. Oh my gosh, I just spilled tea all over the table. Anyway, but yeah, I think decision to go back to school was partly because I wanted to have something down the road that wasn't necessarily working for a skate company. Nothing against people who work for skate companies, because I think that's very admirable and then people have a passion for it. My passion was more of like just the physical activity and being an athlete and traveling and skating and having that be my creative outlet. And the creative part of my life was very physical. And when I would go to school and I would talk about architecture or, drawing or math or something else, that it was this different side of creativity in my life that was completely enticing, and I just loved drawing and designing and doing 3D modeling and everything else that came with the architecture major.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a tough decision for sure. But at the same time, I had to do it for myself just to make sure that this was the right path. And essentially for me, I wanted to make sure that architecture was a long-term goal. That it wasn't just a phase. I was like, oh, I'm interested in architecture for a little while.
Yeah.
Because in my life, I've had like 1,000 different pathways, and the only consistent things have been skateboarding, architecture, and my wife.
Yeah.
Everything else has been like come in phases, and and it's just kind of like come in and then come out. So I had to kind of make sure that I was going to test this out and fully embrace it for a little while and make sure that was going to stick.
Because like from an outside perspective, a lot of people that might have been in your position would have a problem like just dropping that. And like one of the things that I admire greatly about you is your like amazing ability to keep your ego in check, or at least from an outside perspective. Like you seem to be always humble, and like you didn't let the like notoriety and like the accolades you were achieving from being a skater and being like recognized. Like that's something people strive their whole life for, to have recognition in something like a cool field like skating, or an athletic thing, or an art of some sort, or music, and to like just say that was cool, on to the next thing. That seems like mind-boggling to wrap your head around. And it wasn't like you took up architecture as like, oh, time for the real world now. Like you did it like very like I don't know, intentionally. And I think that's incredible.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't something that I was like, oh, this is my big grown-up job, I have to go make money. It's
which
like,
we kind of thought I kind of thought at first, like, oh, I guess he's going to
Gabe's
be
got
responsible.
the pressure, he just has to do it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I don't know, well, just because of where we were at that time too, like it was like, this is the peak for original and the peak for you, and the peak, like from the outside it was just like, this is the place you are. And like, it's not that you walked away because you were still part-time and you were still doing that, but it felt crazy. And then obviously now on the like hindsight's 2020, like we obviously know the timeline. It was also like, I will say that when I was pregnant and I remember being in Jacksonville watching you skate, that was kind of the first time that I was like, this kind of makes sense for him to stop, because you had that bad fall. I remember you were like literally down there with Patrick, and like your entire
I remember
body, you like blew out your knee, that was like hurting, or elbow, I don't know, some body part.
I think
and
it was
then
both actually.
So it made sense. I mean, we do get that, but like it was kind of like, well, if he's artsy, like do something artsy with skateboarding. Like it was hard for us to see you outside of that
something
bubble.
else other than pro skating.
Yeah.
Because like for me as an artist, like that's where I get a lot of my like false sense of self-confidence. Like it's like my stock, it's like my currency is like, if I make a good painting, I feel good about myself. And if someone admires what I do, there's a part of me that's like, okay, you're not a shitty person because you can draw. But like for you, you had that to an extreme with like followers and fanatical people around the world that knew who you were, and like you were able to drop that and start fresh, and that's really cool.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Even more asking on that, I would say, like, do you miss the side of it that you're like a mentor? Like, do you miss that side? Because I feel like that was like big for you, where you got to be around kids and like walk them through what was next and all of that.
Yeah, I think to phrase it a little bit differently, I don't think I dropped it as black and white as we're talking about it, because it was more of a transition into something else, because I did just kind of like start school, but I was continuing to skate. I had a conversation with my my architecture professor, and I was like, I have to fly this competition. It's in Florida. I'm not going to be there for this review. And she was like, wait, what do you mean you're in a competition? What are you talking about? I was like, well, I'm a pro skater. I'm also in school for architecture. And she was like, why would you just go be a pro skater? Just go do that. You're already set. Like, why are you here? And I was like, because I love this. I want to do this, and I'm really enthralled by it. And I want to spend the time to make sure it gets done and be here as a student. And she's like, that's great, but if you're going to be here as a student, you should be here as a student. And I was like, I remember that when she told me that, I was like, oh yeah, I should probably prioritize a little bit. But then I didn't. I just kept skating for a little while, and then it turned into more of a transition in my life that was moving away from full-time skating and to part-time student to full-time student. And then I actually left to do the pro skating thing again for a full year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
I left school twice.
Okay.
In the middle of it. Once.
And what was so appealing that you left? Like, what was the carrot that you were like, this is worth it, I'm going to leave and go back? Was there like a competition coming up that you knew you could do, or you just missed it?
I think it was the latter.
Okay. I
think because I wasn't fully done with what I wanted to do with skating.
Okay, fair enough.
That I had an opportunity, and I knew school would be there no matter what. But I knew my joints and my body wasn't getting any younger, so I was like, if I'm going to do this, I should just do it as long and awesome as I possibly can. And that way, whenever I come back to school, I'll be like, okay, that book is closed. I can move on. I can do something different.
You felt closure.
Yeah, but I can tell honestly now that I have never gotten closure from leaving skateboarding.
Yeah,
absolutely not.
You've definitely taken a beating over the years. Like,
but I love that about it because that's literally what drives me to keep going back to skating, is like that determination to get through something, to get to something next.
Let's talk about that, actually. So, like, skating, I think, is one of those activities that, like, hardwires you for a certain mindset. Differently from other sports, I think, even, because with skating, you can, like, choose mini projects. Like, at first, when you get on a board, I'm going to learn to ollie, then I'm going to learn to ollie 180, then I'm going to kickflip, then I'm going to do this, and it's like it's a progression that you make up your own rules, and you keep doing it, and you know it's going to involve pain, a lot of failure, more pain, more failure. Like, that's not even a question. It's not like, am I going to fail? Am I going to get hurt? Like, all of my broken bones, aside from many stupid things I've done, like slamming my finger in a door, a lot of them are from skating. And, like, that's just something that you know. So, like, can you tell us how skating in particular hardwired you for what you're doing now and what lessons you drew from that?
So I think at the root of skateboarding is failure.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. And I think that as a lesson I learned really early when I started skating as a kid, that failure was not a loss. Failure isn't a bad thing. And that took a while to ingrain into my brain, because failure led to something positive. It was a step. It's not the end of a road. It doesn't mean you should give up and stop. It just means you haven't learned enough yet to get through whatever you're trying to do. And I've applied that to many aspects of my life. Skateboarding was the thing that actually put that there in the first place. Because, as you said, when you're trying a trick and I guess I'll try to learn how to do a kickflip today, or I'll try to learn how to do a 360 slide today.
Yeah.
And you go out there and you fall completely on your face, but it's got to be something inside that makes you want to get through that, because a lot of people have, like, the one fall and they never touch a skateboard again. Like, I can tell you countless people come up to me and say, like, oh man, I used to skate, I was like, go down this crazy awesome hill, and one time I had this really bad fall and I haven't touched it ever again. And they just, I totally understand that, because it hurts really bad.
I feel like maybe they're the ones that are normal.
Hey, maybe. Well said, Chelsea. Well said.
Like, do you think there's something just on that comment that Chelsea made? Is there something
maybe
just
we're
really
not
screwed
all
up about you?
Put
like,
together. Yeah.
Do you have, like, your nerve synapses just have some, like, cut circuits along the way? Because some of the bruises and, like, your elbows stick out like crazy. You got some weird shit happening.
Well, I also think of it from, like, the mother perspective. Like, I'm like, why would I ever, like, you're talking about training the boys to be skaters. I'm like, why would we ever want them to do this? Like, it's crazy.
It's pretty epic.
And it's funny. I act like I don't know anything about, like, that, but I witnessed all of these falls. Like, I witnessed so many of these falls, and it's just a wild thing to be like, oh, you're going to stand back up and, like, try it again. Like, it's really, I mean, I broke my wrist once in snowboarding and I haven't been back on a snowboard. Yeah. Like, it's, like, not my, I don't know. It's wild.
I think it's going back to your question, because it's kind of a different way of thinking to get through something like skateboarding and apply it to something else in your life. Yeah. Because skating was always something that, like, was always a challenge. No matter what, no matter how good you are, you will never be as good as you can be tomorrow.
Yeah.
And that mantra has always driven me to continue to skate and to try to do new things, and also apply it to different avenues in my life. Like with architecture, there's a undeniable amount of work just at the bottom of the pit of architecture. You are always trying to do something better. You're always trying to up your game and create new concepts or sustainability or something that you can put in front of the client to say, here's where we were 10 years ago. Here's what happened to the earth because we did that, for example. Here's where we can go.
If you believe that sort of thing.
If you believe that sort of thing. If you don't like science, then... Anyway, sorry. That's a whole other path we can get there.
Tangent alert.
Yeah, right. But it's true, though. Like, some people have this mentality that if you have a certain way of thinking that works, then you just stay the course. And I think skaters start to challenge that idea as... that, yeah, this works, but how can we make this different? And if it's different, is it better? Is it worse? And then you evaluate and then do that again and just continue. And that's how you find creative new ways to do things, in my opinion.
So I will ask that question because, we talk about things now like skating and surfing being the Olympics and all of that stuff. Like, do you think there will ever be a finish line for skating of like, oh, this is the way you skate? Like, if you want to learn this sport, like if you want to learn to play tennis, you play by these rules. You know what I mean? Like, do you think it'll hit that point?
I don't think so.
No.
I think skate. I mean, the problem is that skating. It's in the X Games. It has the like this whole national circuit now, and with like people like Nigel Houston making hundreds. And I mean, Tony Hawk is obviously another example, but
I heard of him.
Yeah. Have you heard of this guy?
Yeah, he's a tall guy.
Yeah. This super old guy.
Yeah, super old.
Yeah, dude, he still rips though.
Yeah,
he does. Anyway, I don't think that skating will ever conform to anything. I think it's. At its core, it's never about the rules. It's always about what people make it.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is because it's not really easily judged because there's so much of this style. And with surfing and snowboarding, all the other ones too. I mean, you can judge based on style, but that's it's objective. Someone is a judge looking at style, but their objectivity about what is good in that particular sport is going to be different than what someone else thinks. Versus like tennis is like, if the ball is on this side of the line, it's not in,
right.
Therefore you lose. It's like, that's just like a 1-to-1 thing. But it comes down to racing though too. Like downhill skating, it's like, if you get there first, yeah, you win.
Right.
Then at that point, yeah, it's conforming to rules. But, I don't think that skating will ever achieve something that's like, oh yeah, okay, here's the standard at which everybody is judged by.
And whoever does it best wins.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah.
So with architecture, there's definitely that like creative side, just like there is with skating. But there are rules. There's like a lot of rules, right? Like laws of physics.
There are.
There's like
gravity,
city ordinances. There's all kinds of stuff. Like
code, zoning.
Was that a challenge going from an area where like you more or less influenced your style and your ability going to somewhere where like I want to do this thing but it doesn't make any sense, doesn't fit in the ordinance, my boss won't let me? How did that work?
That was honestly one of the biggest challenges, to get from something so raw and organic as skateboarding to something that's very rigid and documented and has a very long history of people that have to do it a certain way, and that's the standard that you have to go by. And I think the silver lining in architecture about that is it comes down to the client. Because architecture, when you're in school, you have, there's no client, you have an unlimited budget, you can just design whatever you want to do and it looks beautiful and you have an amazing time. And then you get into the real world and you have a client that says, okay, I want a hotel with 500 units on this plot. And you have this amount of space to do it in, and you're essentially just designing a box. Or you have clients who are really driven to towards sustainability or have a different ethic behind their investments. We were talking about this last night, that you work with certain developers who in the cities are starting to just completely blow out every single available parking lot and just continuing to fill the cities with taller and taller buildings. And this isn't anything new, but I'm starting to work with more developers who are ecologically conscious, who drank. Yeah. Sorry. I'm actually doing pretty surprisingly well, by the way.
You are doing great.
I was like, I've probably only had like 3 or 4 drinks at this point. That's not true. Anyway, so I think it comes down to you can follow the rules and still have a creative flow within architecture. Because, you're still going to have to confine to some kind of regulations, whether that's code or whether that's the zoning ordinances of the city you're working in. But within those boundaries, you still have creative opportunities.
Okay.
And I think similarly to skateboarding like that, there are certain places you can skate, then there's certain places you can't skate.
True.
Like there are these boundaries that are very evident within skateboarding. And you're just like, oh, I just want to go skate that library. Oh my gosh, it looks beautiful. Or I want to skate that hill in Hawaii that's closed or whatever. Yeah. And you have to find kind of creative ways around that. And especially when it comes to the technical part of skateboarding too, that the what was I trying to say? I lost it.
I don't know, but creative ways around that would be breaking and entering.
That's true. I think I was going to talk about the actual the material parts of skateboarding, like the deck, the wheel, the trucks, everything else, because those are kind of boundaries that you're limited to, and a lot of people find creative ways, like Rodney Mullen, for example.
Oh my god, I would love to talk to that guy.
Oh my gosh. He should be on your next podcast, by the way.
All right, this is a total skate nerd tangent alert.
Okay, go it.
What do you think it is about someone like Rodney Mullen or like Daewon Song that enable them to do what they do?
Exactly what we're talking about.
Tell me.
Rodney Mullen completely thought of a skateboard differently. Everybody thought of a skateboard as a piece of wood with 4 wheels and you rode on the top of it. He was one of the first people to think about, can I ride this thing sideways?
Right.
Can I ride this thing upside down? Can I hop onto literally, can I turn the skateboard vertically and skate on the very, very tip of it? And he was one of those creative people that opened up an entire new discipline of skateboarding, like freestyle skateboarding, because he thought of something differently.
And now you're seeing that in snowboarding too. That video that we like Instagrammed each other, like messaged each other.
Oh yeah,
that dude that took his foot out of the binding and like
the one-footed like judo to
ridiculous,
whatever it was. Yeah. But he was, the thing was about that, he was going like 50 miles an hour and jumped over this like 40-foot kicker and was just like threw 1 foot out. I was like, okay, I can't even get from the base to the lift with 1 foot out. Like,
was that the one where his thing was like forgot to snap in or whatever? He like wrote on there.
Yeah.
So
crazy.
Give me before we get back into the architecture thing, as someone who wishes I could skate as good as you, can you give me some idea of how your brain functions and thinks about tricks? Like if you're trying to learn something, what is something that a typical person trying to achieve the same thing might not be doing that you're doing in your brain? Are you thinking about it in terms of physics? Are you thinking about it in terms of mathematics? Is it purely intuitive?
Yeah.
How do you tackle that, and does that apply to architecture also?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's why architecture was so like enticing to me, because the way you think about problems is very similar with skateboarding and architecture. That in skateboarding, you find a problem as you don't see it as a barrier; you see it as an opportunity. That if you're not able to, do this certain trick, there's always a way around it. That there's a way that you can figure it out. Someone's probably done it or something similar to it, so you can figure out a way to do it. And the way you kind of solve that problem is rigorous iteration. And the exact same thing happens in architecture. That when you have a problem, you iterate through it. You take attempt after attempt after attempt after attempt until you find some kind of, it's not like really like an aha moment, but you have like small victories all the way through until you get to the solution you're looking for. And with skateboarding, when I'm trying to figure out a way to do a trick or I'm trying to think of something new, it comes around very organically. It's just when I'm skating around, I'm just kind of like dilly-dallying a little bit. I do my like normal routine. I do like, shove it, pop shove it. I do, kick flip, or I do backside slide or whatever. And then I was like, and then this little thing comes on my head. I'm like, oh man, what if I did this? What if I pop this up on 2 wheels and did like a blunt slide right here? But I've never done that in my life before. So you try to, you do one, you fall flat on your face, and you're like, okay, well, that clearly didn't work. So how would I do it differently next time? And with architecture, you start by sketching. You do really I remember I had a sketching class in high school, and my the teacher had us fill an entire, made us bring in like 18 by 24 canvases, and he said bring in, I think it was like markers or something that was like really easy, like smooth and flowed really easily. And he was like, I need you to draw, I think he put like a cup or like something really basic object. He was like, I need you to draw this in as many ways as possible in 2 minutes. And so he would on one piece of paper. So you do like 1,000 different iterations and try to fill the entire page. It was a big canvas, and how to fill it in so many different ways. So it gets your hand moving, it gets your brain thinking about different ways to draw it. So you did one that was like modern, one that was more like, kind of abstract. You do ones that were like wireframe. You do ones that were like really,
cross-hatching
sketchy
or whatever.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it gets your brain really thinking, and that's how sketching for me was started to derive my creative process. So if I'm working through a problem that's at work, or I'm trying to think of some solution that, for example, if the building needed to be shaped a certain way, is a rectangle the actual right dimensions for that, or is an oval better for solar orientation and wind or something like that? And a lot of these things you like usually shot down immediately. They're like, if you like, what if I make the building a triangle? Well, obviously that wouldn't work for XYZ.
Yeah.
But at certain points you find little glimmers of hope, just like skateboarding, that you're like, oh, what if I twist my foot this way? How would that change this? Or with architecture, like what if I, curved just this one side of the building?
Changing variables like one thing at a time.
Exactly.
Chels, doesn't this remind you of talking to the astrophysicist where he was talking about changing the laws of physics by pulling in different
so
things?
we have to go back there right now.
The fact that you just made a parallel to what I'm talking about to an astrophysicist, we can end it right now. That's fantastic.
Mic drop.
Mic drop later.
In the immortal words of Vanilla Ice, if there was a problem, I'll solve it.
But can we talk about the obsessive repetition? Because I think that's something I just keep thinking of, the Shaun White interview, how he just talked about it's a full-time job to just obsessively think through these thoughts. Even when you don't look like you're skateboarding. It's wild. And I feel like that also can come back to a little bit of that gymnastics roots too, because you understand your body in a different way than many people do. You have to trust that your body can follow through with the things that your brain is asking it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Gymnastics, I think if I was to do anything differently about my entire career, wait, no, I said that wrong.
Which career?
I guess I shouldn't even say career because there's so many at this point.
Yeah.
I think gymnastics was integral to my skating career, my success there, the lessons I learned, and essentially leading me into architecture too, because that creative drive was built on a foundation of body awareness.
Yeah.
Being able to feel comfortable knowing what I'm doing. Even though if I fall, I know I'm going to fall, and how I fall will be minimized because I know that I can roll in a certain way, or I can dip my shoulder and not have to, dislocate it every single time. Maybe not, 8 out of 10 as opposed to 10 out of 10.
So now that you're becoming a dad, let's talk about this a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I love talking about that. Let's go.
Because Jay and I go back and forth with what principles do we want to give as the groundwork. And we talk about gymnastics a lot. I think the boys will need that. We talk about karate. We talk about all these things that we know well-rounded us. I was a swimmer. That was the same way. It gave me so much understanding of my body and what I could do with it.
Totally.
When your kid is I'm going to be a skater, obviously it'll be a proud moment, but isn't there a part of you that's oh, fuck, what are we in for?
Absolutely. I was talking to Jay about this today. I think we were at the playground or something.
Watching my kids dive bomb off of rocks. Yeah.
That might have been when it was. Yeah. But I was thinking about if my kid wants to pick up skateboarding or some kind of extreme sport, so for those listening, my wife is due in 2 months. Yeah, under 2 months.
Yeah,
about 7 weeks, and I still can't figure out what kind of dad I'm going to be when it comes to their safety.
Yeah,
because I know that I'm going to encourage them to try new things, but at the same time, I'm kind of terrified that I'm going to be a helicopter dad. Just saying no. I remember me doing that and I got really hurt doing it.
That's the hardest part.
Do that.
And knowing that you have to learn that because then you think about all the tools you learned by falling.
Exactly. So conceptually, I know they're going to be fine, but at the same time, I am terrified.
You could just do what Jay does and basically bubble wrap them in whatever the elbow pads.
Definitely.
Pads.
Yeah.
That's responsible.
Yep.
Yeah, that's true. I think honestly, it comes down to their body awareness again. I did gymnastics really early, and it helped. I remember talking to my mom about this when I was doing all the skating things and the jumps and the falls and everything else. She told me it didn't even bother her anymore because when I was a kid, she knew that. And there's a story that when I was a kid, I was I think I was 4 or something like that. I was on the couch, and I walked off the couch and fell flat on my face. But the goal was to try to walk off the couch and then land on my feet and keep walking. And I literally, at 3 or 4 years old, I was walking, fell flat on my face, and didn't cry. I got right back on the couch and tried it again, and did it she said it was 15 times until somehow I landed someone on my feet and then just kept walking, and then I was done. And then then I walked into the room to do something else that I was actually wanting.
You nailed it.
Yeah, and so she was I knew from the start that you had some kind of body awareness that was going to help you get through things. So she still would cringe when she would see footage of me, falling or whatever. But she told me that eventually she was oh yeah, I know you're gonna be fine. You're gonna land on your feet. But at the same time, she's also cautious. but she had a confidence based on like my body awareness for sure.
For the record, I'll always think it's funny that like you were raised by a therapist and like Brad and Scott of Original, the owners of Original, were raised by therapists too. Like it's like such a funny thing that parents were just
true.
like, it's okay. They're going to land on their feet. Like they have trust. We've given them what they need. And you guys are all just trying to kill yourselves on a daily basis.
I hope that the correlation isn't that our parents were therapists. The children of therapists aren't necessarily driven to be skateboarders.
Yeah, I know. It's just a funny combination. But,
yeah, it's true.
So let's move through it. So you're still sponsored right now. So what is like the longevity of that part of it? Like you just want to keep skating. That's the goal.
It's back to how it started.
Yeah.
It's back to
so school's done for the record. Now he's almost full on architect, right?
So I graduated from school. I have my bachelor's of science in architecture, and then I worked for a year, and then I went back to grad school. Got a master's in architecture, and that allows me to start taking the licensure exams to be licensed as an architect. Because a lot of people think that when you graduate from architecture school, you're like, "Hey, you're an architect! Congratulations!
Can you redesign?" Being a doctor, it's like, nope, still got more.
Because like they immediately want you to redesign their bathroom, or I'm building a house. Can you draw me the plans? And and I'm like, by the way, I could totally do that, but I can't put my stamp on it yet.
Okay,
so anyway, so I have there's 6 architectural exams that you have to get through, and then you can get a stamp with your license on it, and then that opens up a whole other mess of opportunities to say you can start your own practice, or you can be promoted to senior architect or whatever, or you can go off and do your own thing. But at the same time, I'm also I'm still maintaining sponsorships as much as I can anyway with the sponsors that I want to. It became really rigorous to start squeezing money out of companies that when I was doing the full-time skating thing. Some companies, I won't name companies, but some companies were a little bit harder to work with than others, obviously, and it was really tough to start making rent at some points because I was like, a lot of companies are like, "Oh yeah, cool, man, that was a really awesome magazine cover you got onto, but it says in your contract you get this amount of money, but we can only afford this much, so we'll give you this, whatever."
Oh, really? And so like not even holding up to the thing they'd agreed to.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
And because the thing is, with skate companies, they're all run by skaters. And if they're not run by skaters, they don't have good street cred, and they end up going out of business anyway, or selling it to someone who actually knows what they're doing. So for right now, it's back to the beginning. It's back to skating because I love it and I will always love it.
Yeah.
And I maintain sponsorships. I still get free stuff. I can still call up whoever I want and get wheels or decks or whatever.
Can you get 4-year-old child skateboard pads?
I'm sure we could work out something, but you probably have bigger hookups with that than I do.
If you can find someone that actually makes them, that's like step one, because we've been having trouble. Yeah. Anyway, so so that's really cool that you can keep it going, though. I mean, you built up that following. They're not going anywhere. Those people love your skating.
What's so funny is, so I have like a at one point on Instagram, it was like, I think it was back at like 5 or 6 years ago, I was gaining like hundreds of followers a day, and it was like it was on the way up or whatever, and then actually on Facebook, it was like, I think Facebook was growing faster than Instagram was, and then all of a sudden Facebook changed their like algorithm or something, which there's a whole other conversation with that. But it was just like, it just crested right at the time I went back to school, and so people, it's interesting because the following has kind of like, it just shifts a little bit because the same people that were following me before, I still get messages from people saying, this is still super inspiring. I know you're not skating as much, but I'm actually interested in architecture, or like, I love the way you were able to transition from one career to the next to help me get into med school, or like it inspired me to start doing this other thing that I didn't even think I could have the possible. Yeah,
use it, right? You have that platform. Like, that's the thing, is like, if you can keep inspiring in those ways, because I mean, there's a few, but who the hell can keep doing that to their body for their entire lives? Seriously. Like, I know that there's people that do it, but like, really the next step is being out on the road and just signing and, doing all that. And that's not, the longevity is just so hard. Yeah. But
there's like Tony Hawk, and then there's like people like
Christian Asoy still banging out.
And I know.
Steve Caballero still doing it.
Yeah. I mean, and those guys, but the thing is though, they're not just skaters.
They're icons.
They're icons, they're legends, and they have companies.
Yes.
So they either started a company, or they're working for a company or doing something else. I don't think I know of a single actually, I could probably think of a couple, but not in the downhill skate scene.
Yeah.
You know, like if you're talking about X Games like Nyjah and Sheckler and everybody else, that's a whole other conversation. But in this particular niche, the success was never about money. You know, it came down to your involvement with the community, because there wasn't enough money in the industry to make people get to that level of fame anyway.
Yeah.
And so part of it for me was when I started to see these people started following me, and it was like gaining this like overwhelming amount of support from people. It was just kind of like a bonus. It wasn't like something that I felt
was that
like
something that really like impacted you? Like it never seems like you never let on that inflates your ego in any way. You never I'm sure on some level it must be like, this is really rad. Like people know who I am or whatever, and you're super cool about it. But how important is that to you? And is there an equivalent in architecture where you want to get, like, is there a bar you set for architecture that's some sort of equivalent to where you were with skating?
Yeah. I think good question, first of all. Secondly, the following of people was, like I said, it never felt like something I was working towards. It was always something that just happened because I was doing what I was doing. So that it wasn't something that I was like, man, I really want to get to 7,000 followers by XYZ or whatever.
Right.
And it's something that I started to embrace and started saying like, oh, if I post certain things like this, then it's a better response or whatever. But it was never like I'm focusing on my, following or whatever.
But your street cred, your like the clout you were getting.
Yeah. Right.
Was that?
Oh, that was
how
a
important
whole
was
other.
That?
Yeah, absolutely. The street cred thing and having the respect within the community was more important to me than gaining 10,000 more followers or whatever.
Yeah, it
was about, because the respect within the community helped to encourage your development as a skater, and similar in architecture that there are certain events that I'm working with within the city of Boston, and they are very high profile. Like, they're not necessarily buildings, but they're kind of events that are happening within the city, and civic opportunities that we're doing.
What's that
as a
one big
firm.
one you just did the second year in a row?
Hub Week?
Yes.
Yeah.
Week. Super cool.
Actually, I'm wearing the shirt right now.
Oh, fancy.
Hub Week,
All
yeah.
right.
So that's one of the things we're talking about, is that there's these high profile events, and buildings too. But there are opportunities as an architect to have that kind of community outreach, and that street cred and that responsibility towards your community is just as important now as an architect as it was when I was a pro skater.
And you're like, oh, I've played this game before. I know what I'm doing. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
It's cool too, because I'm able to walk into an architecture firm like CBT, which is the firm I work for, and feel comfortable, even though I don't necessarily have as much experience as other people who have been working there for 30 or 40 years as an architect in Boston. But knowing that I have some kind of comparable way of living and community outreach and working with designers, and having some kind of confidence in that has helped me to adjust in this new role too, because I'm still that guy who walks in with a skateboard to the architecture firm every day, and like I'm starting to drop like dude and man into like developer meetings, and then everybody kind of like just pauses a little bit and looks at each other like, did that guy just call me dude?
So I was actually thinking about that. Like, where the heck do you skate? Because the entire city is like cobblestone. Is that just like different where you are, or you just learned how to skate on cobblestone?
I have skated on cobblestone. It sucks, but you can do it. No, so there's a really awesome new skate park in Boston that was just finished probably a year or two ago.
Okay.
Maybe a little bit longer than that, but it's a 3-minute skate from my work. So I take the train in every day, and I bring my board with me when it's not snowing and raining. And then on lunch break, or actually in the morning, it's like I get to work at like 8 a.m. and no one is at the skate park. Like, my train goes by the skate park so I can check to see if anybody's there.
That's awesome.
And then I can just go and get a couple runs in, and there's like bowls and rails and everything else that you want.
Heather's going to love that when you guys have a newborn.
Oh yeah. It's going to be great.
She's leaving 2 hours early.
It's 7:30. Where are you? It's like quick session after work, babe.
So this is just like a fun fact. Have you ever designed like the perfect skate ramp? Like the perfect skate park, I should say. So
what's funny is my senior project in architecture school was an urban design project, and we redesigned this whole block around our school. And I did not propose this. In one of the
Okay.
meetings, literally someone was like, well, maybe we should put a skate park in.
You're
And
like,
no one really knew that I was a skater. It was really weird because I was like talking to people and they had like skateboards in class and stuff. And I was like, oh, it's a cool board, man. They're like, oh, thanks.
Yeah.
And like I remember one kid came up with the original and I was like, hey, that's a good board. And he like gave me this look. He was like, oh,
Yeah.
thanks. I think he recognized it. We didn't really talk about it for the whole semester. And then at the end, he was like, are you Brian Bishop, by the way? And I was like, yeah, we're in class together. You know that my name is Brian Bishop. By the way.
But like Brian Bishop. Like
Yeah,
it's like a
like
different
not-
definition now.
right.
Yeah.
You're not the photographer in
I will
Boston. You're the other one.
say, there's a cool
Yeah.
thing about original. Like, I feel like we still want to pull over when we see someone skating in original. It's like this
Yeah.
inner
Oh,
club
totally.
that you're just like, ha. And he has people too, since Shay's art was on those boards that are people are like, what? Wait. Like, if we see them on an original board,
Yeah.
we're like, oh my God, wait. I know
The-
who that is.
The
Yeah, it's
weirdest
cool.
one, we were in Hawaii, and I remember the second it happened, we were in a supermarket during it was a tsunami warning. That like we were on I think we were on Big Island, and we were in the super, like there's like this crazy tsunami warning, and we were like going through the supermarket like frantically grabbing all this stuff, and I was like running around these aisles, and this kid came up. He was like, "Dude, are you Brian Bishop?" I was like, "Not the time." Yes, but God, just go grab the Spam and get out of here.
There's a
Like,
fucking
let's go.
tsunami,
Yeah,
dude.
it's like,
You
not
guys,
the time, dude.
Sorry, this is not really podcast worthy, but do you remember that? We were bar at a
We were
charity
at Bar A
event.
watching on the
We
TV.
asked them to turn it. We put the news on because we thought you guys were all going to drown. You're
Oh
like,
my
we're going to
God.
the top of a mountain, and then it was like 3 inches of flooding happened today.
And then it wasn't even that. We watched this little tiny wave came in, and then we were all like bunkered down. Everybody was like, all right, yeah, we're all set. Everybody can head home.
It's over.
Like, are you goddamn kidding me right now?
I remember that. We're like, all of the people we love are in one place. We're so stressed out.
I know,
And no,
I know.
you were good. You
No,
all
Heather
survived.
was losing it. Oh
I bet.
my gosh.
Yeah, that
But
is
can you
scary.
imagine like being home and your husband or wife is across
Yes.
the world,
Tsunami, yeah.
and there's
And wasn't it
literally
right
nothing
after
you can
like
do.
the tsunami? That's why everyone was so spooked. It was
Shortly
like
thereafter,
yeah,
I
it was
think,
like a year after
Yeah.
the big one.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I mean,
Brian,
That's crazy.
you can do handstands.
I can.
Really great. You can go.
So can you, by the way.
60 plus miles an hour down a hill.
Yeah.
You could do flippity do tricks really great. You could build
is that a thing?
skyscrapers.
Flippity-doo?
I kind of like
Whoopity do
improv.
tricks.
I thought this was a technical. You had me. I thought this was a
What?
skate term.
Yeah.
It's not. I kind of
No,
improvise.
it's a super tech term.
What do you consider yourself sucky at?
Sucky
And
at?
I'm trying to get deep here, as you can tell.
Yeah.
But like in all seriousness, obviously there's a large basket of things that you're a master of, right? Whether you want to like say, "Oh, I'm a master," like you're really freaking good at a lot of things. So what
Thanks, man.
part of your psyche, your mindset, what part of your life, what seems to be like, shit, I wish I was this good at that? Is there any part of your mindset, your way of thinking, your way of looking at life, your paradigm, is there anything that is still just a mystery or a struggle? Or you're just like, I'm awesome at everything?
I'm definitely not awesome at everything.
Brian's like,
Putting him
nope,
on the
I'm
spot.
pretty much great at
mean-
everything.
Can I say no? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
No, there are a lot of parts of my life that need a lot of work for sure.
Like,
I think I don't know. That's tough, man. So the
'cause
thing is,
you're sort of intimidating.
well, and I'm intimidating.
A little bit.
Really?
It's
Yeah.
just the neck. He's so stressed out by the neck.
Got a great jawline.
Oh my god, man. I think if we're getting super into it, I think
In all seriousness, because
The-
a lot of people would look at your career,
yeah.
your multiple careers, and it's hard, I would imagine, for people that don't know how friendly and awesome and warm-hearted that you are, for someone to watch you on YouTube and then see, oh, now he's an architect. Of course he's an
Yeah.
architect.
Yeah.
It's hard for people, I think, to look at some people in life and not know what's going on underneath the hood and just feel like, well, that dude or that girl is just lucky.
Yeah, sure.
Or, well, good for them. I have all this going on in my life.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you'd be willing to talk about that are just hard for you, like
Yeah.
that, and how you deal with it?
So, probably one of the biggest things, and this is kind of weird considering our conversation today. I really have a hard time with change, and I think I thrive on it after I get past it. But when something comes up that is not in my periph, that I don't really see coming, I can work my way through it, and I'm like, oh, I have a confidence through it, but it like rocks me to my core for a second. And I think that and I'm also really impulsive. So in certain moments where certain things happen in my life, I make really bad decisions impulsively, and it's led to a lot of not so awesome conversations with my parents. It's led to me getting put in jail for the night, getting arrested, all that stuff, getting expelled
out of multiple schools.
Yeah.
Is this part of your previous life?
So all of this.
So you used to not be amazing at everything, but now you're awesome at everything. Gotcha. I'm going to go hang myself.
No, I'm
just Gallows Hill.
I think he's saying he still struggles to change, right? Like, you don't like big changes. Well, we were just saying when Jay and I were driving,
he's like, when I was 17, I had a flaw.
Yeah, no. I think it's...
Now I no longer have a flaw.
No. I will actually point out part of this that I actually think is funny is that you and Heather, so Jay and I love traveling. And that's like, I feel like people who travel the world are people that we relate to well because we love it. Jay likes being home a lot. Mm-hmm. So I maybe drag him around a little bit more, but once he's there, he kind of enjoys it. But you and Heather are two of our best traveled friends, but you've never left home, which is a really funny thing.
That's true.
Like, we're literally sitting in like a block from where you grew up or whatever it is. Like, it's wild. So change is for both of you. Like, you like to be in the comfort of like where you grew up, which is interesting.
And I think there are certain parts that I can embrace about change. But if you try to take me from my home, I will have a really, really hard time with that.
Yeah.
And honestly, because a lot of it, I've just had such a rooted emotion like behind a lot of these aspects of my life, because like, for example, my house is close to my parents and it's close to where I grew up. And I remember I went to school in Georgia for probably 2 months in college.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. I did leave. I've lived somewhere else and I couldn't do it. I transferred home. And the thing is, there's a lot of aspects there. But one of them was I wanted to just be back where I was comfortable.
Yeah. Which is funny because it's the place you got expelled, put in jail, thrown away. Like, so many things that you're like, many people would want to run away from, but you were just like, no, I'm still trying to, it's that obsessive thing. I'm trying to perfect this still. So I'm just going to stay here and keep doing the same thing until I get the right results.
There are and this is kind of a design thing too. There are certain things I'm willing to sacrifice on, and there are other things that I'm very stubborn about. And that's one of my flaws, is that I'm very stubborn in really weird ways.
We should like quickly run downstairs and get Heather and be like, now we want to hear. What is Brian not good at? Please tell us.
Ask her.
All right, so give me some examples.
Of what?
Of how you're stubborn. I want to know like the deep inner workings in a minute or less.
In a minute or less?
I'm just kidding.
I feel like we should have started with this question. So my stubbornness is a little bit rooted in family and values. And I'm very open-minded with other people, and I can totally be friends with people with different views and understand where they're coming from and everything else. But when it starts getting personal, I have zero tolerance, and I can
personal meaning yourself.
Yeah, like myself or my own beliefs or my decisions, or if someone, I can take criticism, but I actually have a pretty thin skin when it comes to that stuff.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Never seen that side of you.
It stinks. That's why I never like to talk about it. But the thing is, it's derived from being criticized for everything when I was a kid, and in architecture school and in skateboarding. You're always judged on what you've been doing, what you're trying to put out in the world, and luckily it makes you a better person, but your insecurity will always be there. And I think that part of it is always driving me to do better, because I'm always thinking that what I'm doing isn't necessarily as best as I probably could be. So that's a minute and a half of deep thoughts with Brian Bishop.
I love that you wait until he's a beer in and you're like, now I'm going to get it out.
It's like his force field is down. Let's go.
I feel so much more fucked up after hearing that.
You do?
Yeah.
Why?
I feel like I have so many issues, and Brian's like, well, I don't like to change stuff.
Well, he's like,
next.
He's not going to talk about his whole life's worth of issues. This is not very nice. You're putting him on the spot.
All right, let me preface this by saying, just because when I think of an optimistic, happy person, like your face and probably Gabe
Gomez.
Oh, Gabe Gomez.
Yeah.
Bloop, bloop,
my
pop
man.
up in my head.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
just like to know that like everyone is not, super perfect. Like everyone has some flaw, because that goes back to your skating too. We all have flaws. We have to work
absolutely.
on them obsessively.
Yeah, no.
So that
I was criticized really hard in the skate industry, mainly for my skate style, doing the jumps thing. There was a lot of criticism and throughout the whole community.
Well, isn't it just, I remember Original coming up against that, like just trying to be longboard focused in general.
Yeah.
You're sort of called a poser, and like there's like so many harsh things thrown into that.
He was sponsored by a scooter company. So
it's really funny. Scooter was my prom date's name too, so it's like a very funny,
really?
No matter what, Scooter is just like,
oh man,
it's a hot mess.
That's funny.
He was scootering back before Egypt, right, Bish?
Yeah.
Like so long.
Can you tell us that quick story from last night? We're sitting there telling a story about, what was it?
We were talking about the history of Boston.
Yes.
That Boston was originally like this tiny little peninsula island, and then a lot of like infill was brought in from all over. And you were like, how did they even do that? I was like, oh, well, they used
they had cement that can dry underwater. We're all drinking wine and stuff.
And Jay said, how long ago was that? And Bish thought we meant, how long did they discover fill to build up?
Yeah,
right?
or like the concrete that can cure underwater.
So the answer to how long ago was that was
and fill,
Egypt.
It was like way back before Egypt.
And you're like,
none of us caught on.
We just kept going.
Calls
and then
himself
we're like, wait.
out. He's like, wait a minute, did I just use a place as a time marker?
I like that I just use Egypt to describe a time period.
So Egypt is now
Egypt is not
historical.
current at all.
Egypt only exists during pharaohs. So you fly, I want to go see the pyramids, you fly back to Egypt, you land, and automatically go back in time.
Yeah.
If you go to current day Egypt, it's actually when they're curing concrete.
For the record, we have 2 listeners in Egypt who are probably pretty pissed right now. They're like, excuse me, we are very current.
Guys, Egyptians, let's go.
What?
Your Egypt tour, 2019.
What else haven't we covered here, Bish? Anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
You had that epic little video documentary about you.
Oh yeah.
Why don't you throw out maybe where can people see that link, or was there anything from that documentary that we didn't touch upon?
So that documentary was made by my good buddy Evan Borsier. He is a director and producer on the North Shore of Massachusetts, and he made a documentary about the balance of skateboarding and architecture. And it was really cool because he kind of used it to craft my story, but also to talk about larger concepts about spanning between 2 different industries or 2 different careers, or applying the same mentality to different things in your life.
Yeah.
It was really quick. It was probably like a 6-minute video or something like that. But you can find it on Vimeo. It's like E. Borsier films, and it was cool because it documented a lot of my part of the part of my life where I was just starting to get into full-time architecture. But it covered where I started and then going all the way through, and it was a really great synopsis of the whole thing. But what I liked about it most was the way he crafted it to apply to different people. It was kind of like an interview process, but it had a really great imagery, and it was a really good spot.
Yeah, it was a really good film.
Yeah, thanks, man.
All right, Bish, you ready?
I'm ready.
So, what's the first thing you think of if I have to put you back in your childhood kitchen? You want to walk over there? We'll go look.
Yeah, we can go there. It's
Mom.
5 minutes away. Someone else is living there now, but we go check it out.
It's the podcast. We're coming in.
Yeah. I think, so it's so funny. I told you this last night that I listen to you guys when I'm at work. Mm-hmm. I've listened to these podcasts, and I think about
episode 1 through 8.
Yeah. No, and some of the other ones too. And I thought about what I was going to say when you asked me this question.
All right, let's hear it.
So, I think about my backyard.
Okay.
Because my kitchen had this really big sliding glass door that looked out onto the backyard.
Yeah, mine too, actually.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
And it was always like the view that I thought of when I came downstairs from whatever was happening in my life. There was always that view out to the backyard. And luckily in the house that we're sitting in now, I have a nice backyard that I can look out at, and it has this kind of nostalgic feeling of connection with nature, and which is super important to people's mentality, positivity, and everything. But I feel like that view was always cemented in my memory.
That's
for sure.
awesome.
Awesome,
All
man.
right.
So where can people find you, Bish?
So I'm on Instagram on Brianbishop_. And then, which is funny because
underscore.
Yeah, I know.
There's a lot of Brian Bishops. I was just looking it up. A whole lot.
You didn't want to go with Brian_Bishop, or
yeah, I don't know what it was. I was Brian Bish 9 for a while, and then I think I went to something else, but then I landed on Brian Bishop with an underscore at the end of it. I don't know why. Just wanted to do
fair
it.
enough. Is that your main thing?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram there, and then I'm also
people want their bathroom remodeled. They hit you up. Or?
Yeah. So there's also my Facebook page, which is facebook.com/BrianBishopLongboard. It has all my like longboarding skate stuff. And then I also have Bish Design Co., which is a company that I started a while ago. A little bit.
Awesome.
It's in the back pocket for hopefully down the road. But quick little synopsis. I started an LLC with these guys' help back in the day. When I was skating full time, and I made apparel and use it for another kind of an umbrella company. And the thought is that I'm continuing to use it with architecture and, hopefully using it as an umbrella form down the road too.
Awesome.
Cool.
So that is on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter at BrianBishSkate.
Fair enough. Can we all have a cheers?
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Bri.
Love you
man.
guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So that was Brian Bishop. We hope you guys heard while we love Brian so freaking much. Even just like saying his name, I want to laugh.
I know. Bish. And
Bish.
his manly neck that we've exposed.
He's
so
got
many
some
ways.
neck.
The amount of people that are going to be Googling photos of Bish so they can see his neck. It's so funny.
I have like neck envy. I want to put like on make a vision board with me photoshopped with like a manly neck. So,
anyway,
back to
what do
this
we take
episode.
away from this episode?
I took away that beatboxing with Brian is really fun.
I think time with Brian is really fun.
That is true.
Yeah.
I love the balance that friends like Brian and Heather and our friend Gabe Gomez that we gave a shout out to before really bring out the best in us. And I hope that people listening have some goofy friends like that you can be like equally serious with and just be a nut job with and find pleasure in life.
Yeah. And I had no idea how badly I wanted to understand where he was in life when he made these crazy big decisions. And it might not seem like that big of a deal to people listening because he's just like a successful architect now. But at the time,
almost architect,
like 30 minutes away from being an architect.
Yes.
But at the time, like when you're at the very peak of a career and in a profession that's really freaking competitive and really hard to be at the peak of, and then at that moment you say, I'm going to go back to school and start a different career. It's almost just like, okay, well, one, it's almost like, are you just showing off? Because now you're just going to be the best at fucking everything. And then two,
Brian with his no flaws.
And then two, it's kind of like, well, I guess we're going to go with you on this ride and see like what, but without putting your judgment on his decision making. Like we were kind of like, oh my God, he's crazy.
I think this episode for me boils down to reinvention because it's one thing to reinvent yourself or to want to, but Brian went sort of like the opposite thing. Like you could almost imagine it more being cliche for like a dude becoming an architect and like, man, I always wished I was a pro skater. And then he did the total opposite. Like he did like the thing you put on a trophy in your mind of like, I want to be this thing, a rock star, a skater, or whatever it might be. He did that thing. And then he's like, yeah, that's cool. I'm just going to go be in an office and build buildings. It's kind of
crazy
like
because he's just as fulfilled. It's like he balanced out the two sides of his brains and of his brain.
I think it's hard for people to escape that ego part of it of like, I achieved this thing that I'm getting glory and fame and free skateboards and stuff from, to like completely say, you know what, it's okay to start back from the beginning. It's okay to put down people, following me around everywhere I go. Like,
well, it's funny because as you're saying that, I'm kind of like, what's really happening is you and I are both picturing ourselves as 23.
Yes.
And we're like, could you imagine my ego letting me be like, nah.
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I wanted to be
right now.
a pro skater or a pro surfer or a rock star.
And having foresight. Like
so
that,
bad.
Right?
I couldn't imagine having achieved that and then be like, I'm going to go switch jobs now. And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to stick to this skateboard thing until I'm 70.
Yeah. I think the next interview needs to be with his parents to be like, what did you did something right here. Like you put some serious forethought into like what comes next. But
there are a lot of takeaways. And I feel like a lot of people who might feel either at the top of their game or approaching that, even in their career, like they have this cushy job, they have security, they have achievement in their career. The idea of just being like, you know what, I have this, so what? I'm going to start over somewhere else. That's a really powerful analogy and a powerful metaphor. What's the word?
No,
lesson.
Lesson.
There you go.
No, it's a big takeaway, that's for sure. And that's like, it's so cool to see so many of the people in our life that I had the courage to do these big jumps and like fit exactly into this whole podcast theme that we're going for. Because I think he's like the definition of why we started this thing.
I feel like we've said that a lot, which is a good thing.
Yeah, well,
that's pretty cool. We have great friends.
A couple of people closest to us, yeah.
The whole skateboard thing that we dove into is really big also. Like I feel like I have to put it out there that I have to stop saying like so much. I feel like I've put that out there twice.
He's an Inner Valley girl in there somewhere.
I think it's hanging out with you. Anyway, the whole skateboarding analogy of looking at life is, I think, really valuable. A lot of people I know that are skateboarders who went on to be entrepreneurs, I think, are very strong entrepreneurs because you really do learn pain and failure as just being part of it, and you don't second guess yourself. You don't stop just because you fall and fail and screw up.
It's crazy. Like, it's completely crazy. I can't imagine. So I was a swimmer, and like I can't imagine being like, you might break a bone when you jump in this time, but you're going to try again. And I just would, I mean, there's
you don't see that. Like, is there no analogy there, no comparison for a sport like swimming?
No, it's no.
While losing, that's a failure.
Yeah, but
not getting hurt.
Physical pain.
Not going 60 miles an hour down a hill.
And then just like falling.
Like, you guys have to look up some of his YouTube stuff because he has some wipeouts that he's wearing these crazy like Batman leather outfits, but he's wiping out going 40, 50 miles an hour, just rolling down a hill. And when you see him in person, he's like, yeah, here's my elbows that stick out really far.
Yeah,
my knees that are
he's
screwed
like
up. And
one of the only friends I can say I've actually seen his bones before, and that's like not really. Like
yeah, that's kind of like it's almost weirder than seeing other parts of someone else's parts. Like, would you rather see your friends, regions, or would you rather see their bones?
Jay.
It depends on the friend. It depends on your scenario in life. Overall, I'd rather see people's regions, although not Brian, no offense. Even though I love your neck, I'd rather see your bones. Real bones.
Oh, our takeaways are getting into a weird zone, guys.
Anyway, we do have some really great ones coming up that we're excited to share with you. And looping this back around to the sandwich of the beginning, where I gave a little review. If you guys can shoot us a review on Instagram, not Instagram, well, Instagram's a good spot, but iTunes more so.
iTunes we'd prefer.
Go to iTunes if you liked this. If you didn't like it, don't do that.
Thank you, guys. This was a fun one. We'll see you next week.
Speak to you soon.
Thanks, guys. We hope you loved that episode. If you did love it and could give us some love on iTunes, that would be amazing. You can leave a review and we will give you a shout out at some point on this podcast.
Also, if you guys can follow us on social media, we would love to hear from you. We are on pretty much every social media platform at Shifting Perceptions Podcast, which is the same as our website, shiftingperceptionspodcast.com. We look and reply to all comments, so please share with your friends, tag us. We appreciate all the love.
And don't forget that all of our guests also see all these comments, so I'm sure if you want to just have a space you can reach out, these are the places to do it. We also want to give some love to our amazing photographer that has done all of our photos so far,
Kevin Rigby.
His website is wavelightstudio.com.
And also our really good friend John Harvey, who did the music for our podcast. You can find him at Instagram at Harvey Wallbanger. So that's our little rolling credits. We will be back next week.